Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, rolling. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Warcott Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. Well, it is November 12th, 2021, about 2 minutes after 12 noon. Welcome to another edition of Warcott Matters. We are brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the number one location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. And if you want to pick up their services, I have them. You should too. It's only $1 a day. Warcott Matters is part of mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast from anywhere in the world, all you have to do is talk. All you need is a smartphone and or a computer. Warcott Matters will go ahead and direct it, produce it, manage that podcast. We'll stream it live and put it in the cloud forever, in the legal terms, in perpetuity. And it's for one very low fee, mancavepodcasting.com. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Appel. I'm joined by the madman across the water, the socialist voice of reason, Mr. John Scalia. And we are here to provide you with stories and information, questions, comments, and or concerns about the issues that hopefully interest you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. Stories in the news today. Your out-of-pocket healthcare costs need not be a mystery. About 4% of California younger kids receive COVID vaccine in the first weeks of eligibility. Los Angeles police chief says he'll fire any employee who defies city vaccine mandates. Coronavirus hospitalizations inch upward again, in not only in Los Angeles County, but I believe in like 22 states. More people are coming down with COVID-19. It has started to accelerate once again. From the Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles is getting an influx of federal money to keep using hotels to house homeless people. From the Bay Area News, Cal COVID chaos, Berkeley strict rules leave bears in lurch. And we have those stories plus a lot more. But the first thing that I want to talk about is Alec Baldwin, the movie Rust, and attorney Gary Dourdick. Now, Gary Dourdick never went to law school. However, he was supervised by an attorney, just like Kim Kardashian. Apparently, recent stories indicate that Kardashian has not only stopped studying for the bar, but apparently Kanye West came out like 24 to 48 hours ago and says Kim has been sabotaged. The person at the law school, the person or the peeps at the law firm that she was employed with have sabotaged her ability to study and pass the bar. And I know John is going to want to comment on this. He's probably chomping at the bit right now, but we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so Gary Dourdick never went to law school. He was one of the original peeps way before Kardashian that studied on his own, arguably a loophole in California law. But yes, anybody, including myself, I've never spent a day in law school. If I wanted to be sponsored by an attorney and start studying for the bar, I can do that, and I can take the bar exam as long as I'm properly supervised and sponsored. But Gary Dourdick, one of the most successful attorneys in Southern California, based on record as well as monies gained for his client, is apparently representing a gentleman named, and I know I'm going to screw this up, but I will do my best, Serge Svetnoy. Now, apparently, Serge Svetnoy was an employee. I don't know what his official capacity was on the movie Rust for Alec Baldwin when the shooting took place in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Apparently, my understanding is that Mr. Svetnoy was not physically injured by the accidental shooting. However, has retained attorney Dourdick for mental stress caused by the shooting. And of course, this would have to be filed in California, whether or not it's filed as a state action, which it probably is under personal injury, or a federal action. It has to be filed in California. My understanding is that attorney Gary Dourdick is only licensed in California. If he's licensed in another state, which of course he could apply for and pass, I don't know. Now, this may be a surprise to some of you. Some of you may say, well, hang on a second. You know, this whole incident took place in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Doesn't Santa Fe, New Mexico have jurisdiction? They do have jurisdiction for criminal. However, when it comes to Alec Baldwin's production company, it's located in Universal Studios. When it comes to the financiers, as well as the creators of the Rust movie, that is not only with Alec Baldwin's production company, but he has partnered with ABC and Walt Disney. As far as I know, with one exception, the main parties that are producing and creating and financing this film, with one exception of a Canada-based financer, they're not only all located in California, they're all located in Southern California. Therefore, jurisdiction for any criminal actions arguably would be in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But when it comes to something like personal injury or an unlawful death suit, California clearly, unquestionably has jurisdiction. Now, could there be reciprocal jurisdiction in Santa Fe, New Mexico? Could a case be filed in Santa Fe, New Mexico? I'm going to ask John for his comment in a moment. But there's no question in my mind, black and white, no gray, that when it comes to any type of personal injury, unlawful death suits which fall into the civil arena, California is going to have jurisdiction over these issues. Okay, that's my rant for the day. I'm going to go to the only attorney in the room, and he's not shy about saying it, and I'm not shy about saying I never spent a day in law school, okay? But John Scalia not only has spent more than a day in law school, he graduated from law school in California. He practiced for more than 40 years. And I would love to have John's questions, comments, or concern. Well, John has no questions for me, but I'd love to hear his comments on my rant. John, take a few minutes, take it away.
Well, first of all, let me say that, I knew Gary Dourdick before he became a lawyer. I worked with him at a personal injury firm that handled a lot of high-end cases, and he was the paralegal at the firm. He's a very bright guy. He was 24 years old at the time. And I said, Gary, and he didn't come from a rich family. So I said, Gary, how do you have a Ferrari? And he said, well, I did a lot of work for some guy and he couldn't afford to pay me. He said, I don't have the money to pay you, but here, you can have my Ferrari. And that's, 24, he had his own Ferrari. So you knew the guy was going somewhere, and he's very bright. He's exceptionally bright. I posted a blog and I said, look, if the studio guys thought they were going to overwhelm any PI, any personal injury lawyers who sued them, they've got another thing coming. They're not going to overwhelm Gary. He's got all the resources and all the patience and all the expertise. So if they have any brains, and of course, ego is going to get in the way, they will settle immediately with Gary. Because here's the reason. if they let the case go on, Gary's going to do significant discovery. And in the discovery, he's going to show that they were completely negligent and that the whole operation was bollocks. Okay. I mean, in his press conference, he said that, the armorer, the little girl who was in charge of all the weapons on the set, who was hired because her daddy did the job for 25 years in Hollywood, he said, well, she was inexperienced. Well, once he does discovery, he's going to do more than say she shouldn't have been hired because she's inexperienced. He's going to say she was a nepotism hire and totally unqualified. And I also said to the yokel locals in Santa Fe, who undoubtedly would be overwhelmed by any attorneys that the Hollywood people got in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I said, if they have any brains and if they can overcome their ego, they will sit back and let Gary do the discovery. Because once he does the discovery, he will make the elements for their criminal case for them in Santa Fe. Now, that's all premised on the fact that, the egos are going to get in the way and discovery is going to go. And so chances are a lot of it's not going to happen that way because attorneys do have egos. Now, as far as jurisdiction, Steve is right. There's no question California has jurisdiction. Could it have been filed in Santa Fe, New Mexico? If actually it could have been if you filed first. And of course, that's one of the funny things in law school. You realize that there's literally a race to the courthouse. Why? Because lots of times a race to the courthouse determines which court has jurisdiction. And in this case, which state would take jurisdiction. So there's plenty of nexus with California. So they're not even going to raise it in the pleadings, I'm sure. They know that California has jurisdiction. So the case is going to go on. It's going to be really interesting now because they know they're in for a dogfight.
And one last thing about this story that neither John nor myself mentioned is that in the criminal case, the defendant is not required to testify at a deposition against himself. However, in a personal injury lawsuit, the defendant is required to subject themselves to a deposition. We've got about 1 minute left before our break, and I want John's questions, comments, or concern about that particular issue. Go ahead, John.
Okay. The actual, you're right in general, but in this case, no. The answer is, and I had, yeah, that's right. He doesn't have to give a deposition. I'll tell you why. I had personal experience. I was representing an attorney who was in charge of a law firm, and there was a workers' comp case filed against him by she was a fraud. She claimed she got injured, and it wasn't really true. But okay, and she wanted to take his deposition. Well, the problem was that in the course of the case, before the case, a bullet had been fired through her apartment, and she claimed that my law firm, my attorney, who had a name similar to mine, meaning Italian, was, that he was the one behind the bullet going through her window. So the cops in the local jurisdiction opened an investigation, and she wanted to take his deposition. I said, well, you're going to have to give your deposition. He said, no, I'm not. I said, what do you mean?
John, do you mean a police officer's deposition?
No, I'm talking about my client, the attorney. And so I said, they're going to take your deposition. He said, no, they're not. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, here, I got a case for you. Isn't that amazing that he had this case right at the ready? He said, look, here's a case in federal court that says if there's criminal charges pending against you or a criminal investigation going on, you cannot be forced to give a deposition in a civil proceeding. So as long
as the criminal case is going on, correct?
Even if there's just an investigation, there doesn't have to be anything filed. As long as it's an open investigation, they cannot. In fact, I went to the WCAB and I objected to the order requesting the deposition and prevailed, and they couldn't take his deposition.
Let's follow up on this in a moment. I want to. We're at the break. You're dialed into Warcott Matters. We're brought to you by the workcompcentral.com. If you want the #1 location for workers' compensation in both California and around the United States, check out the workcompcentral.com. They've got a free 7-day offer. If you want to pick up their services, it's only $1 a day. Warcott Matters is also put on by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your podcast, a podcast, anywhere in the world, all you need is a smartphone and or a computer, and all you have to do is talk. We will produce it. We will direct it. We will manage it. We will stream it live, put it in the cloud forever for one low fee. Thank you for joining us. Before we get to the news, we're still following up on California attorney Gary Dourdick, representing, and please forgive my pronunciation, Serge Svetnoy, who was an employee, presumably, on the set of Alec Baldwin's Rust. He was not physically injured. He is claiming emotional stress. This personal injury lawsuit has been filed in California under California jurisdiction. I just made the point before the break that one difference between a criminal case and a civil case is that the defendant in a criminal case is not required to undergo a deposition, whereas a defendant in the civil case is. John disagreed with me. John, I'm going to bring up, O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson, of course, was not subjected to a deposition in the criminal case, but then under the personal injury case was required not only to take a deposition, but 10 days of deposition. John made very good points that while an investigation, a criminal or a criminal case is going on, a civil defendant is not required to undergo deposition. And again, the deposition that I'm referring to for O.J. Simpson was after O.J. Simpson in the criminal case was acquitted. So, John, if you want, take a couple of minutes or a minute or whatever, and then comment, and we'll get to our news.
Okay, no, you're absolutely right. The case was over, and that's why they could take his deposition, even though there had been a criminal case. But while there's a pendency of a criminal case, and that means just even under, if it's an open investigation, you can't take the deposition of the party. Now, there may or may not be a pending criminal investigation against Alec Baldwin, okay? Because the people in Santa Fe haven't said that anybody is under any investigation for any possible criminal charge, or that they have even opened a criminal investigation. So it's not clear that one is going on, and who knows what the people in Santa Fe, what those attorneys know. Yeah.
No, John, I have to respectfully disagree with you. The investigation started within 24 to 48 hours after the incident. They came in, they did interviews, they collected evidence. That criminal investigation started 24 to 48 hours after the event happened.
That's an investigation. It's not necessarily.
It's a criminal investigation, right?
Investigation of a homicide. It's not necessarily a criminal investigation. Homicide simply means that somebody is killed by the hand of another. It doesn't mean that the crime has been committed. So that
who on whose behalf was the investigation conducted 24 to 48 hours after the shooting happened?
Homicide was committed. They have to investigate the circumstances of the homicide.
And who is they?
District attorney, but that doesn't mean it's a criminal investigation at that point. It's just an investigation.
And okay, you know what? I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to explore further. Okay, we're ready for our news that affects you, California employees, employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. John's got the first story.
LAPD chief ready to fire officers who defy vaccine mandate. Los Angeles Police Chief Michael Moore said he is ready to fire any of the department's 12,000 employees who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID-19 or get tested twice a week for the disease. The LAPD's goal of having a fully vaccinated workforce is to ensure the safety and welfare of the department's officers, civilian workforce, their families, and the public, Moore told CBS Money Watch. That means enforcing the city's stringent vaccine mandate, which requires that unvaccinated employees get immunized by December 18. Meantime, unvaccinated workers must get tested twice weekly on their own time and dime. Those who receive medical or religious exemptions will be reimbursed for the cost of testing. I think it's about time that a public police officer said, you know what, cops are subject to the law too.
Absolutely, no question about it. Next on our news, about 4% of California younger kids received COVID vaccine in the first week of eligibility. Close to 150,000 California children ages 5 to 11 have received a first dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine since young children became eligible last week. New state data shows more than half those doses were administered Monday through Thursday of this week. The state estimates that about 3.5 million children ages 5 to 11, which means 4.2% of the newly eligible population have been vaccinated so far. Vaccination rates among children vary widely from county to county. John.
Now, this is a story near and dear to my heart because I am a fanatical sports fan. A little plug for my program, which follows after this one, Sports and Everything with my son, Jameson. But this, Cal Berkeley has had to cancel his game at the USC. Here's why. Cal's COVID chaos, how the Bears got caught up in Berkeley's stringent testing. On one side, in the middle of the football season, a brouhaha has broken out in Berkeley. On one side, the city's public health department, which insisted on testing the entire Cal football operation, even asymptomatic vaccinated individuals, after a few players were found to be COVID positive. On the other side, an infectious disease specialist from UC San Francisco, who roasted Berkeley's response and downplayed the need for the mass testing during a television interview Wednesday night. And in the middle, the frustrated, powerless Cal football program, which is 99.5% vaccinated, but somehow slammed with 44 positive COVID-19 cases and the ignominy of being the only major college football team unable to take the field this season because of a coronavirus outbreak. Or is it an outbreak? So here you have a college football game that's been canceled. Now, the UCSF disease specialist is Monica Gandhi, who specializes actually in HIV, and she's an expert in the field, and she thinks this whole thing is ridiculous. And I think every college football fan is going to think it's ridiculous. And I'm sure there were plenty of people in Southern California who booked their tickets to go up there to see SC play Cal. If it's up there, I think it's up there, and wherever it is. And there's going to be a lot of disappointed college football fans, including me. Steve.
No question about it. From the city news service, coronavirus hospitalizations inch upward again in Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County coronavirus-related hospitalizations climbed a bit yesterday, November 11th, to 633, an increase of 16 from Wednesday, according to the state dashboard. Of these patients, 169 were being treated in intensive care, an increase of 7. The county's public health officials announced 1,441 new infections on Thursday for a total of 1,507,736 to date and 18 new fatalities, bringing the county's death toll to 26,814 since the pandemic began. John.
Well, this is interesting because now we have the two vaccine makers who started the mRNA vaccine squabbling with each other over what side effects they have. Moderna says COVID vaccine has fewer breakthrough cases than Pfizer's, but higher myocarditis rates in young men. Moderna defended the use of its COVID-19 vaccine Thursday, saying the prediction it offers against severe disease, hospitalization, and death outweighs the risk of myocarditis, a rare heart condition seen in a small number of young men who received the shot. The company announced last week that the FDA needed more time, that's a shock, to decide whether to authorize its 2-dose vaccine for use in children ages 12 to 17, as the agency looks into reports of myocarditis or the inflammation of the heart muscle. Burton cited data from France, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was the one first approved in Europe and the one I got,
and is still to this day not approved in the United States. Go ahead.
But it's based on the old vaccine theories of, it's the old vaccine formula. And these two vaccines are the new mRNA where they screw around with your genetics, which I think is fine. But anyway, I think it's funny that the two big ones are bickering between each other over which one has more side effects. So, since I got the AstraZeneca, I can just sit back and laugh at this. But anyway, yeah, Steve.
Well, John, they've got nothing more to argue about. In other words, they can't argue that theirs is more effective than the other. So they're going to argue about the side effects. It's the only last thing to argue about. Whatever. From the Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles is getting an influx of federal money to keep using hotels to house the homeless people. Throughout the pandemic, the city and the county of Los Angeles have rented thousands of hotel rooms for homeless people at risk of contacting coronavirus. The massive effort was was partially made possible by the federal government's willingness to reimburse local governments for each dollar they spent renting the rooms and repurposing hotels into temporary housing. Repurposing, there's a new word. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's reimbursement of costs associated with sheltering people in individual rooms was slated to run through the end of the year. John.
Well, I'm having trouble finding, I have to scroll down to find where I've got the my next news story. But basically, the next news story is Americans are going to feel the inflation pinch because, oh, here we go. CBS News, one way Americans feel inflation's pain, health insurance premiums. As experts debate whether inflation gripping everything from winter to heat to holiday gifts to American Thanksgiving tables is temporary or likely to endure, Americans are facing another relentlessly rising cost, health insurance premiums. Getting health insurance through work now costs more than $22,000 a year for families who pick up roughly $6,000 of that tab, the Kaiser Family Foundation found in its annual benefit survey, with employers picking up the rest. And as I pointed out time and time again on this program, in Europe, there's socialized medicine where you have total coverage, and the average European spends about $5,000 for that total coverage. And in America, on average, this is just for insured people here, on average, it was $7,500 per American. So you take your pick, which you'd rather have. But I know what you'd rather have because I know what kind of propaganda you get on that side of the pond. Steve.
And I've got the last news story of the day from the San Francisco Chronicle. More widespread uptake of COVID-19 booster shots would help lessen a potential winter surge of the coronavirus, say health officials who are advising with increasing urgency that anyone who can get a booster do so before the holidays. If everyone eligible to get a vaccine booster got one today, I'd have a significant blunting effect on a swell in new cases, said San Francisco Health Director Dr. Grant Colfax. There's something else I learned, a significant blunting in effect. I have an idea what it means, John, just by the way it used, but I've never heard that word before. Pardon me. I have heard the word blunt before in conversation and in something you smoke. But a blunting effect regarding the COVID-19 virus, I've never heard that before. So I learned something new again. John, burning thoughts, closing desires before we close the show.
No, it's just the COVID thing is going berserk. We're going to have to live with it, obviously. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it seems to be here to stay.
I was just going to say, we're going to have to live with it at least a little bit longer. And yes, John, I agree with you. It is here to stay. Thank you, all your listeners, for joining in once again to Work Matters. Much thanks to Scott Walton of legendary Uncle Studio, John Scalia, the madman across the water, the socialist voice of reason out in Munich, Germany, all the good people back at the workcompcentral.com and my partners at my empire, mancavepodcasting.com. My name is Steve Appel. We'll see you on Monday, 12 noon live for another edition of Warcott Matters. Stay safe, everybody.